Welcome back to On Texas Football, a special NFL Draft edition of On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel and Rod Babers. Rod, before we get into the nitty-gritty with the Longhorns in this year's draft, and again, it should be another banner year for Steve Sarkisian. It should be 3 Longhorns going in the first round. First time that will have happened since 1980. Of the 3 of us, you're the one that's been through the draft process. And I know in 2003 it was – Rod, I'm not trying to date you, but it was primitive compared to what it is now. What is that? You were a 4th round pick. What was that draft day like for you, just in terms of the weight?
Well, I think every prospect believes they should be drafted higher. So if you're not drafted in the first round, every player believes they should have been drafted higher. The guys in the second round. So there's a little bit of anxiety. There's for a lot of guys a little bit of angst. About being drafted, lower than they ideally believe they should be drafted. But ultimately, you want to enjoy the process. I mean, it's something you've been thinking about your entire life. So you don't want to let that, that experience or at least that circumstance really dilute the experience for you. So if I was given, and I've given some of those guys advice, like, no, man, enjoy it. It's going to be fun. There may be some drama involved with it. Some team may call you and say, we're going to draft you. And then you may not hear from them again. You get ghosted and then they draft somebody else. That's happened a lot. All right. A lot of guys have stories about that. Don't let the drama dilute the experience for you. You want to make sure you enjoy it. No matter where you're drafted, it's an honor and a privilege to be drafted. But the majority of the guys, I would say 80% of the guys who are drafted believe they should have been drafted higher, period. That's just, and you know what? You should believe that because you should believe you're a better player. It's sometimes a little tough to watch guys who you saw in college, who you thought clearly you were a better player than. You may have even gotten more accolades than that player. You may have been all conference when they weren't all conference. You think to yourself, I'm a better player. I proved I was a better player. Why is the NFL drafting this guy ahead of me? Well, because the draft is not always about necessarily your productivity in college and what you did in college. It's about your potential as a player, your upside as a player, premium positions, all that stuff plays a role. It's a lesson that you'll have to learn during the draft. And if you're lucky enough to become an NFL vet, then you'll learn that lesson over and over and over again.
And real quick, Rod, just you're one of the few and the proud and the lucky who've gotten that phone call, that life-changing phone call. When you get that phone call to find out you've been drafted, what's that moment like?
It is. It's exhilarating, right? That's the moment that you've been waiting for your entire life. And like I said, unfortunately for some guys, they get the call that, hey, I'm going to draft you. Then it doesn't happen. Like that happens a lot. It was a once in a lifetime experience. And if you could be on the verge of crying tears of joy, which I've never done in my life, I'm still waiting on that moment. That's one of those moments you'll be close, like that, and your first child, and some guys do it at their wedding. I've never cried tears of joy, but I was pretty close that day.
There you go. Well, I don't know if he's ever cried tears of joy. We have seen him throwing his hat, and that's CJ Vogel. And CJ, as you study the draft as close, I think all 3 of us study the draft pretty close and follow it. CJ, it's gone kind of back and forth, and we've seen times in these mock drafts where one of those 3 Longhorn first rounders, either Jaden Barron, Matthew Golden, or Kelvin Banks, we've seen times where one of them has been the first Longhorn off the board. Metaphorical gun to your head, CJ, when we get to Thursday, who's going to be the first Longhorn that gets their name called and why?
Yeah, I like Jaden Barron. I think that's going to be the guy for me. Again, that position versatility in the secondary, it just lines up. Yeah, everybody needs a good corner. Everybody needs a good safety. Everybody could use a guy that plays the nickel, and he's going to provide exactly that. Of course, he's got the top end speed with the 4.39 time in Indianapolis. He's coming off of a year where he only allowed 8 yards in man coverage according to PFF, and he has a Thorpe in his back pocket. So he did technically have the best defensive back season of anybody in the country last year in college football. I think every team in the country or in the NFL would use a guy like Jaden Barron. And I think the football IQ, he's going to do tremendous in those pre-draft interviews. I talked about it after Indianapolis. Wherever he ends up, it feels like to me, it won't be too long before the mayor is handing him his own key to the city because of his charisma, his personality, and of course the play on the field that will back that up. But I really like Jaden Barron. And what's going to be interesting is that run on wide receivers. In the first round, you see it, is not a great wide receiver class this year, but you see 3 to 5 go every year, basically. Mm-hmm. who's first, who's second, who's third? Where does Matthew Golden fall into that conversation? Of course, how do teams start to view Travis Hunter at the very top as well?
Mm-hmm. Rod, you agree with CJ that it's Janae Barron, or you got either Kelvin Banks or Matthew Golden in mind to be the first Longhorn off the board?
No, I mean I feel like he's trending that way. He might be the safest of all the picks.
I agree.
As CJ mentioned, I mean, if you don't work out at corner because you think maybe his arms are too short, that's the big knock on him playing corners, that his arms are kind of short. So he may not, translate to being able to play press right consistently. But you can move him inside to play nickel, or you can, and some teams even said he could play safety if you need him to play safety. I think he's the to me, the safest pick because you have margin for error there if you get it wrong at a certain position or the scheme doesn't fit a certain position. But that's the beauty of Janae Barron. I think any scheme can draft him. Even, some people say, well, if you're a man-heavy scheme, you don't want to draft Janae Barron. It could be true, but that's like 3 teams in a league that are more than 50% man-heavy teams. Like, not a lot of teams do that because it's really hard to do. It's hard to do in college, hard to do in the NFL. So I do think because of his versatility, he fits damn near anywhere. It's him. I don't know why Kelvin Banks has been dropping. Seems like people are overthinking the Kelvin Banks thing. But Kelvin Banks to me is still one of your best pure pass protectors, if not the best pass protector in the draft. So people want to, overthink it, but it still could be Kelvin Banks. And listen, the Matthew Golden thing, I've seen more mock drafts now to have him going to the Cowboys than ever before. Everybody, all the latest mock drafts, I don't have the Cowboys taking him, and the Cowboys are at 12. That's pretty damn early. And it's about a 50-50 shot he's going to be the first wide receiver drafted. So be interesting to see.
Yeah, CJ, when we look at Matthew Golden, I think if you look at all 3 of these guys, it's interesting to look at Sark's program from a player development standpoint because all 3 of these guys represent the different paths you can take to get to the NFL. For Janae Barron, he wasn't recruited by the staff. He was inherited. He had to buy into the culture. The staff had, trust had to be earned. And he became one of the reasons why Texas has been to the CFP semifinals 2 years in a row. Kelvin Banks, the staff recruited in that first full cycle recruiting class. The Pancake Factory was a thing at that point. He was a blue chipper, and he's 3 and done to the NFL. And then you got Matthew Golden, who needed a fresh start out of U of H, comes into the portal. CJ, we can talk a lot about player development, but I think it's summed up pretty well. Sark talked about it in his most recent press conference. Look, the process works for everybody, and we've proven that. Doesn't matter who you are, you can come play football at Texas and get to the NFL.
Yeah, it's been interesting to follow the 3. Of course, you mentioned, Jeff, first time for Texas to have 3 guys, expected to go in the first round in quite a while. It was kind of like that last year as well, right? Byron Murphy, wasn't the highest rated recruit last year or on his defensive line at DeSoto, right? That went to Shamar Turner. You talk about Xavier Worthy. He was really one of the highest rated draft recruits coming out of high school that Texas was able to get early on in that Sarkisian tenure. And of course, you look at Adonai Mitchell, who was also expected to go pretty early in that draft a year ago, portal. So it almost mirrored itself in a way to this 2025 draft, but it just goes on to add to what this staff is able to do with development. I think a lot of that goes to Torrey Beckton in the offseason, right? This Texas speed is pretty remarkable. I've been trying to keep track of what these guys have been running at the combine. You realize Bijan Robinson's 4.46 in 2023 is the 10th slowest time that we've seen from a Texas player in the last 3 years. That's a different level, right? And so I think that's exciting because, again, Texas stacking top 3 on now a number 1 recruiting class. It's only going to continue. And I think those key positions where you see a lot of guys start to develop in the trenches at the edge position specifically, you're going to keep seeing a lot of guys sent to the combine, a lot of guys hear their name in the draft. So, yeah, this is just another testament, another chapter in the book of Texas development, something that we no longer need to worry about based off of what was a pretty shallow 15 years, leading up to this point.
Rod, as a long-suffering fan of the Dallas Football Cowboys, I kind of hope Matthew Golden goes somewhere else. But the more I think about it, I've always viewed him, I don't know if he's a number 1, but if he's your number 2, you're probably cooking with peanut oil at that point. Is Dallas, from that standpoint, would Dallas not maybe be the best fit for him where he can come in? He doesn't have to be the number 1 because CeeDee Lamb's the number 1. He can fit right in to be the number 2 And Dak Prescott, and seems like every year is a contract year for Dak Prescott. Every year is a referendum year for QB1 in Dallas. The Cowboys, from just a fit, might be the best situation for him to walk into.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the insiders believe that. I mean, when you're looking at the latest mock from Daniel Jeremiah, Dane Brugler, Mel Kiper, Lance Zierlein, they all got Matthew Golden going to the Cowboys. He just visited the Cowboys. Jerry Jones was FaceTiming his mom. So this could be a smoke screen, because Jerry Jones has smoke screened everybody before. Remember the Jonathan Brooks smoke screen? What he says before the draft, he said something about Jonathan Brooks and how much he loved Jonathan Brooks. I was like, oh, Jonathan Brooks to the Cowboys seems perfect. They need a running back, blah, blah, blah. And of course, that's more of a smoke screen. So smoke screens do exist this time of year. There's a lot of smoke, though, with Matthew Golden to the Cowboys. And a lot of people have talked about that, the Texans like Matthew Golden, too.
Yeah.
I don't know if the Texans will be interested, but they need weapons for a young CJ Stroud. They may go another direction in the first round. I don't know if he'll be there by the time the Texans draft. But they do like guys that are the state of Texas products, and they do like homegrown products. And Matthew Golden being from Houston, so there's a more than an outside shot that he could end up in the great state of Texas.
Yeah, Rod, you mentioned this, so I'll stay with you. Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans were both at Texas Pro Day, and we know, the Texans, they've taken Texas guys before. The Texans sitting there at 25, like you said, CJ Stroud could use another receiver. They just traded Laramie Tunsil, so they could obviously use an offensive lineman. I got a feeling if any one of those Texas guys is there at 25, there will be a University of Texas player that gets allocated for that first round pick by the Texans, whether it's Golden still sitting there, if Banks for some reason is still sitting there. If Kelvin Banks is there, Rod, Nick Caserio might run from Houston up to the podium in Green Bay with the card. I don't think he'd be able to get there fast enough.
Yeah, no, good point. If one of those guys, they won't make it all the way to Houston, though, because Caserio, who is known as Cook-Serio because he has made more trades than any other GM in the NFL since he took that job, he'll trade up to go get him.
Yeah,
he won't sit. If he sees somebody sliding like that, any of those Texas guys sliding, he'll go up and get them, because they could use any of those guys. They could use Banks. Of course, they could end up using Matthew Golden there as well. Hell, everybody could use Ja'Day Barron, but I think we all agree ain't no way he's sliding. There has been talk, because analytically, the analytics don't like Matthew Golden, guys. Like the analytical nerds do not like Matthew Golden, because the analytics are not big. Matthew, like, go look at his yards per route run. Go look at some of the analytical driven stats. They are not very favorable, or they don't paint him in a favorable light. What does is the film. The film does not lie. And everybody who's just watching film, they say Matthew Golden is a first round pick. So it's all about the film, and then the analytics, and then the productivity. Because some people say he wasn't productive any time in his career other than that 7-8 game stretch to end the season for Texas. So there's a lot working against Matthew Golden. So he could slide, but if he does slide, it won't be for too long.
CJ, Rod mentioned it, and I've been mentioning it since the start of the draft process. I think Kelvin Banks is walk-in starter ready as a pass protecting tackle in the NFL. There's going to be a lot of teams that overthink it with him. When do you think he comes off the board? Because I think he could go as early as maybe 10 to the Bears, 11 to the 49ers. I thought 25 to the Texans, but I'm with Rod. If Kelvin Banks starts slipping, if he's there like around 19, 20, Houston might just say screw it and just go up and get him. CJ, who can be the lucky team that ends up with Kelvin Banks, you think, at the end of the day? And what's your theory? What's your opinion on why teams are overthinking it with him? Because he's checked every question teams have had about Kelvin Banks throughout the process. He's answered it, yet people are still finding things wrong with him.
Yeah, it's interesting with Kelvin Banks, right? Because coming into the year, it's Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks. Who's going to go number one, right? And you see the quarterbacks start to rise. You see Ashton Jeanty have a tremendous season. Travis Hunter wins the Heisman. Now you start seeing these tackles start to fall, when recent years would suggest that tackles are the most important position that you need aside from quarterback. Someone to protect the blind side of your franchise. Who would that be? Well, to me, it's Kelvin Banks, right? It's a guy who's been there and done that, was battle-tested from the very beginning of his Texas career. We can go through the entire laundry list of edge rushers and now NFL players that he faced while at Texas. And look, I think the numbers in the tape would certainly back up that he had a pretty solid career, right? The one hesitancy with Banks, and I think this is kind of what's stumping some guys in the NFL draft position rooms right now, is look, what's he elite at testing-wise? And I know folks are going to hear that and say, who cares? The tape is what the tape is. But that's what the combine and that's what these pro days are for. It's to make sure that every box is checked. And I think there are some questions about his overall elite athleticism. Is that there? Because Will Campbell touched a 4.9. You know, Armand Minbo with that extreme size touched 4.9. You know, there are some lengthy offensive tackles right now that are touching a little bit better numbers in terms of their 5.10.5s, their pro agilities, you know, their change of direction drills, and then of course the top end speed. I think that's where that hesitancy comes, because originally coming into all of the measurable season, as we call it, it was, does he have the long enough arms? And he does, right?
Yep.
Longer arms than Will Campbell. Does he have a big hand? He does, right? He checks those boxes, but it's the movement that I think kind of scares some folks at the moment. Still, turn the tape on. You'll see a pretty darn good cornerback, or offensive tackle.
Yeah.
What I will say in terms of where he ends up, look, he just visited the Cardinals at 16. I think it'd be tough to watch Texas fans see, you know, their franchise cornerstone left tackle go block for Kyler Murray, but I think that'd be a great spot for him.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, it seems like the Cardinals, they've been I've seen all three guys, Golden, Banks, and Barron, mocked to the Cardinals at some point. Same thing with the Seahawks. So probably in the teens is where all these guys are going to end up going. Rod, I'll throw this back to you because we haven't talked about Quinn Ewers yet. And as we get here towards the end of this, we've got to. And from this standpoint, could where Quinn goes, could it be dependent on what happens with Shedeur Sanders? Because let's say the Saints at 9 might hold the cards in this draft because, you know, they've got a situation now where, and again, it could be a smokescreen, but maybe they're thinking they take their quarterback now. If they take Shedeur Sanders at 9, theoretically that pushes all the quarterbacks up the board. Or if he goes into the 20s, the quarterbacks could slide further back. Rod, where do you think Quinn ends up going? And what do you feel like is the best fit for him in terms of his career in the NFL?
The fit one is easier. I think if he ends up with a mixed Shanahan offense, so any of those Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan offense, he ends up with a Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan, that'd be ideal. I don't necessarily see that happening, but any of those kind of offshoot offenses from that tree would help because they're very quarterback friendly. Sark's offenses often have a lot of similarities and commonalities with those offenses. Really high play action rates, high RPO rates, high screen rates. Those are all little cheat codes to help your quarterbacks just put them in straight drop back situations. That's what you don't want Quinn in. A lot of predetermined reads. You want to get the ball out quickly. So, even Miami, which is kind of in that Sean McVay, mixed Shanahan offense, it'd be almost perfect for him because it's a lot of first read, early read, heavy RPO, heavy play action pass, a lot of speed, surrounding the quarterback. So with a lot of quarterback crutches, as they like to call them, I think so. Any of those offenses would be great. Where he ends up, oh man, I'm gonna say right now, I feel like he's gonna go in the third round. I feel like the early third round is where he's going to go. He could sneak into the second, but go look at the history last 10 years. You haven't had a lot of quarterbacks drafted in the second round, period. NFL's not, for some reason, they don't like drafting quarterbacks in that second round. They usually, if the quarterback they believe is worth it, he has some of those elite traits, they'll just look past any downside and look at the upside and go, we'll just draft him in the first round. Screw it. We know he's got some downside. We'll just draft him in the first round. I don't know if they're going to do that with Quinn. Because right now they're looking at Quinn with more downside than upside. Mm-hmm. So I think Quinn will drop potentially out of that second into the third. And I think that's where teams are going to look to go after Quinn, is in the third round there. Unfortunately, this draft, the scouting process, I don't think has been kind to his draft stock at all. I think it's actually dropped. I think the pro day hurt him a little bit. And I think he's kind of dropped out of I've been seeing like these analytical breakdowns about quarterbacks. They'll leave Quinn off. Which, by the way, in the clickbait era we're in, is almost considered ludicrous because you want the Texas fans to click on it. So they're deciding like, nah, it ain't worth it. I ain't gonna look at it so I think he's kind of fell out of favor in this process. I think he goes in the third.
CJ, piggybacking off what Rod just said, could Quinn fall down the board far enough to where he actually suddenly, maybe late third round, has some value for somebody? Said, hey, we didn't think there's any way Quinn Ewers was going to be here. Maybe he goes in the late third and somebody ends up really happy taking him.
Yeah, I think the minute that clock or that draft round hits 3, right? The minute you get to the 3rd round, there's value in Quinn Ewers, and that could be whether or not you have a quarterback, franchise guy or not. And right now, if you don't mind, I'm going to call my shot right quick. A little Babe Ruth,
Do it.
picked 68, 3rd round. So pretty early in the 3rd round. That's the Las Vegas Raiders. I know they just, signed Pete Carroll as their head coach. They just acquired Geno Smith. There's continuity there. He's under contract until 2027, but there's an out in 26. And I think right now, with the way that the Raiders have just been completely hampered by quarterback play over the last few years, I mean, it would make sense if they say, never again. We've got to make sure that we've got a guy. And, Pete Carroll, during his time in Seattle, they made sure that they had someone backing up Russell Wilson. They had that with the Tavares Jackson. They had that with a Drew Lock behind Geno Smith recently as well. Do they go that same route and find a young quarterback for cheap, right? Those 3rd-round contracts for a quarterback, it's not something that you're breaking the bank for. I could certainly see that right now with Quinn going to Las Vegas. So I'm going to put my shot in right there. But if he falls anywhere to day 3 or the back end of the 3rd round, I think that's absolutely great value on what could be a solid NFL, producer at the next level at the quarterback spot.
Man, he ended up with Chip Kelly, right? Chip Kelly's the OC there. And Tom Brady. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Right. Let's stay on Quinn from that standpoint. Where do you think his ceiling is? Because me personally, I think best case scenario for Quinn, if everything goes in his favor and he ends up being a starting quarterback and he fulfills his potential, I think the ceiling is somewhere around Phillip Rivers. But I think most likely that's the absolute best case scenario. I think more likely it's somewhere between. It's funny, CJ, you just mentioned that team, the Raiders, because I think the ceiling is somewhere between Kyle Orton and Geno Smith, somewhere on that spectrum. I don't know where you feel, Rod, like his ceiling is, but I feel like it's somewhere between Kyle Orton and Geno Smith, where maybe a year or two he's a starter, but I could see him having a 7-8 year, maybe even a double-digit year career in the NFL as kind of a, stopgap spot starter backup type guy.
Yeah, I think basically what you're saying, I kind of agree with. I stopped short of franchise, right? I don't know if his ceiling gets to franchise QB, where a team is willing to invest the entire franchise. He's the face of the franchise. I don't know if I see that ceiling with Quinn in the league. Do I see him as a guy that can become a starter? Of course, yeah. With right situation, circumstance, so I'm with you. But I think when he gets close to his ceiling, he'll just be a guy that they consider a starter. I don't know if he'll ever be the franchise. A team will ever see him as the franchise quarterback. By the way, that's rare. It's only there are 32 teams in the league, and not all 32 have franchise quarterbacks. Okay, like that. It's like it may be like 20 of them or so in the league, the real franchise QB. So I do think he has a chance to be a starter, given the right situation. I see Quinn competing to be a starter in the right situation, but there's a lot of things he's got to overcome, right? How to handle pressure better, pocket presence, his footwork, got to be a little bit more disciplined. When he gets deeper into the progressions, he's got to still have, kind of refined passing mechanics when he gets deep into progression instead of them decaying as he gets deeper into progression. So some things he's got to work on, but if he ends up with the right QB coach in the right situation, I can see Quinn competing to be a starter in a couple of years.
Okay, Rod, I'll stay with you, and we'll go a little rapid fire here to finish it off. Rod, by the time we get through day 2, through the first 3 rounds of the draft, those top 100 picks, we know at this point Isaiah Bond probably not going in that top 100, so we can probably throw him out given his situation and the uncertainty there. How many Longhorns do you think, Rod, are going in the top 100 this year?
Yes, you got the 3 in the first round. You'll have Alfred Collins and Cam Williams, I think, will go in there. I'm going to go with right now. That Isaiah Bond would hurt too.
But Andrew Makuba's gotten himself where he's probably day 2 at this point.
He is. That's a good point. I mean, I love me some Andrew Makuba. I just think they devalue safety so much, and I don't know why. I don't get it. I'm going to go with top 100. I'm going to go with 6. I'll go with 6. I'll say 6. I feel 5 is probably more it is, but I thought Isaiah Bond would easily make 6, but you got me feeling like Makuba is climbing up some boards too. But I you know what? Take it back. I'll go 5. 5 in top 100.
5.
I think Makuba drops out of it.
Okay. So, CJ, let's assume it's 5 or 6. Longhorn, you don't think is going in the top 100. You think is going to have the best value on day 3.
Ooh, day 3. That's Baron Serell for me. I love Baron Serell. I think that this is a guy who's going to be able to play the run very well. He's got enough in his bag to be able to discard of, top end offensive tackles in the next level as well. He's a strong guy. He's a guy who will buy into any locker room that he's a part of and then become a big part of it. And I think that's something that Texas saw very quickly in his career, of course, coming from New Orleans or from Louisiana, coming in and earning the trust of his coaching staff immediately year 1, and then becoming a face of that program by the end of it. I like Baron Serell quite a bit. And I'll tell you this, I think there's some real interest in David Benda in NFL draft circles. I'm not saying he's going to end up getting drafted because he wasn't invited to the combine, but I do think that there's going to be some late round, 7th round interest in him. We might actually see him be one of the more coveted, undrafted free agents when it's all said and done as well.
Rod, I agree with you when you said Janae Barron is probably the safest pick among the Texas guys in this draft. Is Cam Williams, in your opinion, the riskiest? In other words, does he have the lowest floor, but maybe the highest ceiling of anybody in this Texas draft class?
That is good. Yeah, that's a good one. He may be the riskiest because you haven't had a lot of sample size, and out right now you're banking on just the measurables. So I like that. I would say another one, kind of risky pick, but a really high ceiling is Jaden Blue.
Yeah, good pick.
In this era of football, a pass receiving back of his stature, who's got world-class elite speed to pull away in the right system. I could see Blue being a star in the right system, but compatibility is going to be a big part of this thing in terms of the success of all these guys.
CJ, Longhorn draft hopeful that has the biggest impact as a rookie in the NFL is who?
That's a really good question. Draft, I have to imagine it's a guy like Matthew Golden. I think that immediately he's going to be a number 2 for anybody, depending on what team he ends up. Look, he's got the traits and the tools to be a number 1 guy in the NFL. Of course, we talk about that 4.29, the hands, the body control, etc. He'll be able to find success and separation at the next level. Matthew Golden might be that guy. But overall, how could you not look at a franchise left tackle and say, yeah, that's our guy from day 1. Kelvin Banks it is.
Rod, I'm going to give you a nice Benjamin and say, Rod, go to Vegas and put this on who you think is most likely to eventually be an all-pro and really cash in on that second contract.
Damn.
Who you putting it on?
Oh, the all-pro in this group. That's really good there. That's really good. Right now, I think that my best bet would be Janae Barron, probably.
Yeah, good pick.
Just because he's got more chance to do it, depending on where he's playing. And I see a lot of like Cooper DeJean in his game. I know you don't compare a white safety to a black cornerback, never. But in terms of the versatility in his game, I see him being able to thrive in multiple spots. I think Janae's the safest pick for that, especially if he's in a zone-heavy scheme too. He's going to run a lot of pattern match like Texas did. I mean, he's going to walk in and be ready not only to start, but make plays day 1. So I'll go with Janae.
Yeah.
CJ, other than Baron Serell, which at On Texas Football, we're all Baron Serell fans. Other than Baron Serell, who are you going to be cheering for the most to get drafted on day 3?
Day 3, man. Look, if it's not a David Benda, I'm excited to see what happens with Gunnar Helm. And he's kind of fallen back into that conversation. I think we all anticipated a day 2 floor for him, and then the ankle injury, and then you've kind of seen him fall down some boards. Maybe a team still reaches for him pretty early, but look, again, you talk about good locker room folk. You talk about guys that you want to go to battle with. Gunnar Helm's one of them. And in a tight end class that's looking like the way it is now, you can certainly find some deep value with Helm later in this draft.
Good stuff. Yep.
Rod, I'll give you it won't be rapid fire, just your final parting shot on as we get ready for the week of the 2025 NFL draft. Your final thought is what?
My final thought is Texas is really close. They'll probably have the second most players drafted. They'll definitely be in the top 3. And that's really the key, right? Since LSU won the national title, the team that won the national title is also at the most players drafted. This year, it'll be Ohio State. That is not a coincidence. So the more people Texas starts to get into that NFL pipeline, the closer they get into the promised land.
All right, we'll be covering the draft here on the channel and over at ontexasfootball.com. Have plenty of draft talk throughout the week. And don't forget the draft starts on Thursday. Friday, you get rounds 2 and 3, and then all 3 days should be busy for the Longhorns, wrapping up next Saturday with rounds 4 through 7. And then, Rod, we always talk about it, man, the pool of undrafted free agents. Rod, CJ, anybody you guys like as an undrafted free agent who maybe he doesn't make a roster, he's not on the 53, but he's a guy that you think has a chance to maybe stick a little bit of that undrafted free agent group?
Silas Bolden. He's got the speed, the hands, and something that a lot of guys don't. So the wiggle will find him a roster spot.
I like Gavin Holmes, man. I thought he tested well. He was one of your best cover guys last year. Just didn't get a lot of reps, but he can cover, though. I mean, that cat can cover. So you can show you can cover in NFL training camps. He's got decent size. You know, he's got some film. They may take a chance on you as a kind of a cheap project in the practice squad. So I like Gavin Holmes.
All right. Rod, thank you for the time and the knowledge as always. CJ, thank you for everything. Thanks to Matthew and everybody behind the scenes. Thank you to the entire On Texas Football staff. Don't forget, 1 year of access at ontexasfootball.com for $49.95. You can get it using the promo code OTFOG. That's OTFOG. Go use it at ontexasfootball.com for 1 year of access for $49.95. For Rod, for CJ, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I am Jeff Howe. Thank you for watching, and until next time, hook 'em.
Welcome.